Have you ever told yourself, tomorrow I'll start, only to find that tomorrow comes and goes and nothing has changed? Maybe it's a plan to drink more water, go for a short walk after lunch, or spend just 10 minutes reading instead of scrolling. These promises are so small they almost feel invisible, like they wouldn't matter if you kept them or not. And because of that, it's easy to dismiss them. But what if I told you that these tiny, almost insignificant promises to yourself could be one of the most powerful tools you have for changing your life? Not because of what they achieve directly, but because of what they teach your brain about who you are. We tend to think big change requires big action, dramatic resolutions, complete overhauls, new me declarations at the start of every year. But here's the hard truth. Those grand gestures often fail not because you're lazy or undisciplined, but because they skip the most important foundation: trust in yourself. Every time you set a goal and fail to follow through, you chip away at that trust, just a little. And over time, that little becomes a lot. Your brain starts keeping score, even when you're not aware of it. That score shapes your self-image. It tells you what kind of person you believe you are: someone who finishes things, or someone who doesn't. Now here's where the hidden power of small promises comes in. These are promises so tiny they're almost impossible to break. Drink 1 glass of water when you wake up. Write down 1 sentence in a journal. Step outside and take 3 deep breaths. When you follow through on these tiny commitments, you're not just checking a box, you're sending your brain a signal: I keep my word. And that signal starts to shift your identity. You're no longer trying to become the type of person who exercises, reads, meditates, or saves money. You are that person because you do the thing, even in its smallest form. Think of it like planting seeds. A single seed isn't much to look at. It's not a tree, it's not shade, it's not fruit. But put it in the right soil, water it regularly, and it grows into something real. The small promise is the seed. The act of keeping it day after day is the watering. And the tree? That's the larger habit, the identity shift, the change that feels natural instead of forced. Let's dig a little deeper into why this works. Psychologists call this self-perception theory. It's the idea that we form our beliefs about ourselves by observing our own behavior. If you see yourself following through even in tiny ways, you start to believe you're reliable. That belief influences the choices you make next. Suddenly, a bigger goal doesn't feel impossible. It feels like a natural next step. And there's another reason small promises are so powerful. They bypass your brain's resistance. The human mind is wired to conserve energy. Big goals trigger a defense mechanism called goal shielding, where your brain subtly resists action because it anticipates the effort will be overwhelming. A micro-commitment is too small to trigger that alarm. Your brain doesn't feel threatened by 1 push-up or 2 minutes of tidying, so it lets you pass. And once you start, momentum kicks in. 1 push-up becomes 5, 2 minutes becomes 10. You've probably experienced this with chores. You tell yourself you'll just wash 1 plate, and 20 minutes later, the kitchen is clean. Small promises work the same way. But instead of cleaning dishes, you're cleaning up your self-image. But here's the catch. These promises only work if you actually keep them. That means starting with a scale so absurdly small it almost feels like cheating. If you want to build a writing habit, don't start with write for an hour every day. Start with write 1 sentence. If you want to meditate, start with 30 seconds. The key is to choose a promise you can keep even on your worst day, when you're tired, stressed, sick, or traveling. This way, there's no escape hatch for your brain to say, today doesn't count. Every day counts because the promise is small enough to keep. Over time, this does something magical. It rewires the way you think about commitment. You stop treating discipline as a battle against yourself. Instead, it becomes a quiet agreement with yourself. And the more you honor that agreement, the stronger it gets. It's like strengthening a muscle. Start with a tiny weight, and over time, you can lift much more without strain. I've seen this principle work in surprising ways. A friend of mine struggled for years to start exercising. Every January, he'd buy new workout clothes, download a fitness app, and tell himself, this year, I'm going 5 days a week. By February, he'd quit. Then, one year, he made a different kind of promise. Every day, I'll just put on my running shoes. Not run, not even step outside, just put the shoes on. It sounded ridiculous, but he kept that promise. Some days he stopped there, other days he walked around the block. Eventually, he started running, not because he forced himself, but because the barrier to starting was gone. 6 months later, he was running 3 times a week. The transformation didn't come from discipline. It came from consistency and trust. You might be thinking, but won't I just stay stuck at the tiny step? That's where the second layer of this method comes in, what I call promise stacking. Once your brain has proof that you keep your word, you can gently raise the bar. One sentence becomes 3. 30 seconds of meditation becomes 2 minutes. The key is to make the jump small enough that it doesn't break the chain of trust. Because the moment you start breaking promises, you risk undoing the work. And this brings us to something deeper. Why breaking promises to ourselves hurts more than breaking them to others. When you let someone else down, you might feel guilt or embarrassment, but the relationship can recover through apology and repair. When you let yourself down, there's no formal apology process. The damage often goes unnoticed, but it accumulates in the background. You start to avoid setting goals at all because deep down, you've learned that you won't follow through. Small promises reverse that cycle. They give you quick, frequent wins that rebuild self-trust one brick at a time. And once that trust is strong enough, you can lean on it to take bigger, bolder actions without the constant fear of failure hanging over you. There's also a fascinating neurological angle here. Dopamine, the brain's motivation chemical, isn't just released when you achieve a big milestone. It's also triggered by small wins. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you get a microdose of that reward signal. Over time, your brain starts to associate the act of keeping promises with a feeling of satisfaction. That makes you want to do it again, creating a feedback loop that makes consistency feel good instead of burdensome. In fact, some behavioral scientists argue that this is the most reliable way to build willpower, not by forcing yourself through sheer grit, but by making success so easy and rewarding that it becomes the default. That's the hidden strength of small promises. They sneak past your brain's resistance, deliver consistent rewards, and slowly rewrite the story you tell yourself about who you are. And here's the most empowering part. You don't have to wait for Monday or the start of a new month or the perfect time to begin. You can make your first promise right now, and it can be something so small, you could do it while listening to this video. Because the moment you do, you've already started changing who you are. Not in theory, but in practice. Now, the real question is, how do you choose the right first promise, and how do you make sure it sticks? That's what we'll unpack next, because this is where most people accidentally sabotage themselves, and I don't want that to be you. So how do you choose a small promise that actually works? The first rule is that it has to be specific. Vague promises like be healthier or be more productive are almost impossible to keep because they don't give your brain a clear action to execute. Instead, think in concrete, measurable terms. Drink 1 glass of water before breakfast. Read 2 pages before bed. Do 1 stretch before getting dressed. The second rule is that it must be ridiculously easy. If your goal feels slightly challenging, you've already made it too big. The whole point is to choose something that you could still do on a bad day when you're tired, grumpy, and short on time. The easier it is, the more likely you are to keep it, and the more your self-trust grows. The third rule is frequency. Small promises work best when they're daily, because repetition is what rewires your self-perception. The more often you prove to yourself that you keep your word, the faster your brain updates its identity file for you. That's why it's better to have a tiny daily promise than a bigger one you only keep once a week. Now, there's a subtle but important mindset shift you need to make to really unlock the power of this technique. Treat each promise as sacred. That means no negotiation, no "I'll do it later," no skipping just because you don't feel like it. If you start making exceptions, you're sending your brain the exact message you're trying to avoid. I can't trust myself to follow through. The beauty of tiny promises is that they're so small, there's almost never a legitimate reason not to keep them. Even if you're sick, traveling, or overwhelmed, you can still drink that 1 glass of water, write that 1 sentence, or take that 1 deep breath. And when you keep a promise in those difficult moments, it's like putting your self-trust growth on turbo mode. It tells your brain, I do this no matter what, which is the foundation of any lasting habit. Another powerful way to strengthen this practice is to track it. You don't need an elaborate app, just a calendar, a notebook, or even a sticky note where you mark a check every day you keep your promise. This turns your progress into something you can see, which adds a layer of satisfaction and accountability. Watching those checks add up becomes its own kind of motivation. You won't want to break the chain. Over time, you'll start noticing a shift. It might be subtle at first. You'll feel a little more confident setting goals, a little more motivated to start things, a little less likely to procrastinate. And then one day you'll realize that you're not just keeping small promises. You're taking on bigger challenges almost without thinking about it. That's because you've redefined who you are in your own mind. You've gone from someone who struggles to follow through to someone who keeps their word. And that identity change is the real prize. Think of it like building a bridge. Big goals are like trying to leap across a canyon in one jump. It's risky, and if you fail, you fall hard. Small promises are like laying one plank at a time. Each plank might not get you far on its own, but over time they connect the gap completely. You can cross at your own pace without fear of falling because the bridge is solid and reliable. One more tip: don't turn this into a perfection trap. If you miss a day, the worst thing you can do is spiral into guilt and throw the whole habit away. Instead, treat it like repairing a small crack. Address it immediately without judgment and keep going. Missing once won't destroy your self-trust, but letting it slide repeatedly will. So, if you slip, recommit the very next day and remind yourself why you started. There's also an emotional benefit here that's easy to overlook. Keeping small promises creates a sense of self-respect that's deeply grounding. It's not about impressing others or proving anything to the outside world. It's about knowing quietly and privately that you can rely on yourself. That feeling is like an anchor in a storm. When life throws chaos your way, you have at least one steady thing you control: the ability to keep your own word. And that's powerful because so much of life is outside your control. You can't always control the outcome of your efforts, other people's behavior, or unexpected setbacks. But you can control whether or not you drink that glass of water, write that sentence, or take that breath. That sense of agency builds resilience. Eventually, you'll start to see how these small wins ripple into other areas of life. Maybe you start a new project without overthinking it, or you finally follow through on a long postponed task, or you feel more confident speaking up in a meeting. These moments happen because your brain now expects you to take action. You've trained it that way. It's not magic, it's psychology. And the best part is, you can start right now. Before this video ends, think of one promise you can make to yourself today. Make it small enough that you could do it half asleep, on the worst day of your year. Write it down, say it out loud, and keep it. That's it. You've planted the seed. Keep watering it and see what grows. And if you found value in this idea, imagine what other tools and concepts you could learn to strengthen your mind, reshape your habits, and understand yourself on a deeper level. That's what we explore here on Mind Unlocked, your toolkit for better thinking. So if you want to keep building that toolkit like this video, share it with someone who could use a little self-trust right now, and subscribe so you don't miss the next insight that might just change how you see yourself forever.